Yes, the honourable for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, it seems to the members of the opposition that Barbados would have been better served if the Minister of Finance had done what he did last year and not bothered to trouble this country with a budget. Having not delivered one last year, arguably we were made no worse off by his actions. We were made worse off through the legacy of his policies over the last few years, but at least last year he could claim that he did not inflict any harm on the people of this country through a budget. We've heard all kinds of criticisms, all kinds of argumenta ad hominem, as we say, they cuss us, asides. But the truth is, Mr. Speaker, we have a document of near 80 pages, which, when you read it, and everybody over here has read it, I can assure you of that, sir, it is rambling in parts. In parts, it is inconclusive. It is illogical in its approach. And it represents nothing more, sir, or little more than a set of words strung together. It fails, yes, that document, that blue document, sir. It fails as a roadmap. It fails as a roadmap for Barbados for the rest of this financial year. It fails as a roadmap for Barbados in the short term, and it fails as a roadmap for Barbados in the long term. But we've been treated, Mr. Speaker, to speech after speech. The only time any member on that side showed any enthusiasm for what was going on is if they felt that they were personally attacked. But other than that, sir, they had absolutely no enthusiasm for any of the measures that have been implemented by the Minister of Finance. But in the same way that people in this country are not free to speak their mind under the strong arm of this administration, they have not been free to speak theirs either. And so to a man, Mr. Speaker, they have each stood up and proclaimed how great the Minister of Finance is. What a fabulous budget. They have not been true, Mr. Speaker, to the needs and the dreams of their constituents. They have been true only to the mantra of the Democratic Labour Party, survival at all costs. But the people of Barbados are not echoing those praises. They're not saying great budget, sir. In fact, they must by now be considering this administration to be delusional if they really want people to believe that it was a great budget in any respect. Tourism sector has complained that they continue to be unable to access the promised concessions. The private sector has said we are not impressed. One Barbadian businessman of some significant reputation has said that the budget was backward. And to a man and woman, everyone on the streets of Barbados is preparing for a worse time to come than they have before. So, Mr. Speaker, there's no celebration possible for us tonight. There's no celebration possible for the members of my constituency or St. George North or South or any of the constituents that we represent. But equally, sir, the government must agree that there is no celebration possible for their constituents either. I'm reminded, sir, of Tacitus, who said, "And where they make a wasteland, they call it peace." Others have paraphrased it in this way: and when they had created a wasteland, they called it civilization. As much as it hurts, I believe that the landscape of Barbados today appears more to be a wasteland than at any time in the last 30 or 40 years. Industrial unrest at an unprecedented level. Layoffs, closures. The ADC sent home 13 people yesterday. Today. Summarily. I remember well, Mr. Speaker, that early in the first term of this government, they sent home 30-something people from the UDC. And on it went, sir. But like robots, we are expected to fall in line behind this government, follow it blindly, turn a blind eye to its wrongdoings, and lie supine, Mr. Speaker, without a single word of dissent. And in between the speeches, with aggression and angst and all kinds of stuff, sir, we were even tonight treated to a speech with some tears. In fact, that is the only thing, sir, that broke the near boredom in listening to the speeches of the Democratic Labour Party, sir. And perhaps that would be a good place for me to start, because I really hope to focus on what is before us and not really to deal with certain matters that make the government feel very uncomfortable. But, Mr. Speaker, there's that saying, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. The members of the Democratic Labour Party find it distinctly uncomfortable for anybody on this side to raise the specter of conflict of interest in respect of two of the front bench's dealings with a company called Transtech, sir. Mr. Speaker, I am not here to say that anybody thief, nothing of the sort. But I do know what a conflict of interest is. It is easily defined. But to put it in simple terms, Mr. Speaker, it is where a relationship exists between individuals such that that relationship is likely to prejudice the arrangements with a third party. We know what a conflict of interest is. I fail, Mr. Speaker, to understand how it is possible for one minister who is a lawyer by profession and another who has a doctorate in theology to come in here and not appreciate that this is no trivial matter, but that it is a matter of urgent concern. Now, they can stand on that side of this chamber and fire pot shots over on this side. Who do what? Who did what when? But there is only one cabinet in Barbados today, and it's made up of people on the front bench, on their side. And whatever failings might otherwise exist or might have existed in history, it is their duty, Mr. Speaker, to stand up and accept when they are wrong. Plain and simple, Mr. Speaker. An explanation came from the Attorney General. In fact, I don't even know he offered it as an explanation. I think he used it more as an example. I don't think the Attorney General could really justify any of this. He talked about Simpson Motors. Well, sir, I had a little time in some early boredom today, and I checked the pages, sir. And I saw a long list of companies that are financiers for motor vehicles. I saw a long list of companies that sell motor vehicles. I did not see the name Transtech appearing in any of them. So I have to ask myself, and perhaps the members involved, the two ministers involved, can tell the chamber, whether that company is engaged in the ordinary business of leasing vehicles. Can any member of the public pick up the telephone and call the number and say, sir, I would like to lease a vehicle, how many you got? Or is this some private arrangement entered into between these two cabinet ministers and that company? What are the terms? The reason this is important, Mr. Speaker, is because it has come to our knowledge that the SSA has just approved a payment to that company of $900,000 in circumstances where its other suppliers have not been paid for 6 months. Its other suppliers have not been paid for 6 months, but the very company that the minister leases his vehicle from get $900,000 in one fell swoop, not in installments. It wasn't spread across so everybody get a little drizzle. The conflict of interest, Mr. Speaker, is obvious. It should not be tolerated. And to put it in simple terms, it is not right. It doesn't look right. It doesn't smell right. And for the administration that came to power in 2008 and devoted 4 or 5 pages of its budget to good governance, talking about transparency and accountability and all those kinds of things, sir, they have fallen far short of it. There is no properly governed country, none, that would tolerate that. And if it is to happen, the circumstances ought to be made public. But what is perhaps worse is that the minister did not even seek to defend him or his ministry or his government on any of the Cahill allegations. Nothing at all. The minister had nothing of substance to say. Now, perhaps that alone tells a story. But the members on that side don't want us to talk about those things. They want us to talk about the budget. The budget. Let us talk about the budget, sir. This administration pretends to be interested in employment. But one member on the front bench earlier said that government can't maintain employment at those levels, so they had to cut. They had to cut. But what is bizarre, sir, is that this government is now forcing the small businesses who are being expected to shore up the employment numbers, forcing them, sir, into a position where they cannot sustain themselves. But the government wants to talk about the budget. So let's talk first, sir, about the tax certificates that people now have to produce in order to work. I would begin, sir, by pointing out to this administration, because I honestly do not think they are aware, that Barbados is a signatory to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. We signed it in 1973. And one of those articles, Article 6, clearly states that individuals have a right to work and impose on administrations, impose on state parties, a fundamental obligation not to put things in the way of people exercising that right to work. Now, I heard the Minister of Finance, well, he was not on his feet, but I heard him make an aside, but we wouldn't stop people from working. This certificate is not intended to do that. But you know, sir, it is apparent that the Minister of Finance either doesn't seek the advice of his Attorney General, or that the Attorney General doesn't offer it. But that is their business, not ours. I want to let the Minister of Finance know, firstly, that I consider it reprehensible that in his statement he used the words professionals. It is not that all self-employed people are not professionals. They all are professionals in one way or another, but I believe that the minister used that term in his sentence to try to focus the spotlight on the lawyers and the doctors and so on, so that the hairdressers and the mechanics would not feel that this has anything to do with them. But it does. And I'm not going to repeat the list because the leader of the opposition went through it yesterday when she spoke. But the fact of the matter is that when you examine the legislation, Mr. Speaker, in each instance where you are required to register, you can only get a certificate permitting you to register after you have paid your fees to the registry. So in the Legal Professions Act, sir, it is covered in section 5(1)(d) and section 12(1). Mr. Speaker, in the Electrical Wireman Licensing Act, section 8A6 requires that you must pay the fee before you can get your wireman's license. The Engineers Registration Act, Section 8, you must pay your fee and present the receipt to the registrar before you can get your license renewed. The Land Surveyors Act, sir, Section 9.2, pay your fee and then you can work. Section 9 of the Medical Registration Act, sir, pay your fee and only then can you work. Section 7 of the Section 3 of the Pharmacy Act, same thing. Travel Services, Section 24, pay your fee or else you cannot sell a plane ticket. Veterinary Surgeons, Section 9. The Nurses Registration Act, so every single one of them, you are required to pay your fee before you are able to practice your profession under law. And I have no doubt, sir, I have no doubt that any higher tribunal will find that the imposition of this requirement that you prove to government that you've paid your taxes or else you can't work will be found, sir, to be unlawful and a contravention of your fundamental human rights. Now, we are forced to assume, because the minister has not said, that it even includes land taxes. And we say this, sir, because we know that individuals who have tried to register for professions under this have already been told that they had to prove that they paid VAT and they paid their land tax. So long before the minister has come in and made this announcement, in fact, they had turned a blind eye to its implementation by the BRA. So, sir, your land tax for your house where you live that has nothing at all to do with your practice as a lawyer, you must now prove to the BRA that you have paid your land tax before you can appear in a court. An engineer must have paid his or her land tax before they can go and opine on the soundness of a building. I honestly don't think, sir, that the Minister of Finance has taken into account what this means. But you know, the situation with nurses proves a point. It is my understanding that the majority of nurses in Barbados are employed by the government. But they too are required to produce a tax certificate before the government can register them. So the nurses at the QEH now, I don't know how they can work it out. Maybe the director of the QEH is going to stand around and memo, bring all of the land tax bills in by Monday morning so that we can see if you pay your land tax or not. Because if you haven't paid it, we cannot register you as a nurse and you cannot practice nursing in my hospital. Have they thought about that, sir? And that doesn't even take into account the tremendous strain that it will obviously put on the BRA that can barely handle its existing workload, but must now find tax clearance certificates for all these people, sir. Mr. Speaker, I don't buy the minister's explanation that, you know, people ain't paying the tax and you want to capture everybody. The Income Tax Act provides adequate mechanism for policing the income tax regime. It provides for audit of individuals who the BRA does not feel paying the taxes. It provides for taking up of judgments by deposit of certificates of non-payment of taxes, a whole set of mechanisms. It provides for garnishment as well, sir. So what really needs to happen is that the minister needs to get the individuals in the BRA to take a look at the individuals that he is thinking of and police them on a one-by-one basis. But to require every man jack now, every man jack to produce the tax certificate, sir, is really not to put the burden on the individual. That's where we are. But you know what worries me, sir? I am concerned about what next. I cannot see any logic behind asking waste haulers to produce a tax certificate from the BRA in order to be able to dump garbage at SBRC. What's the relationship? What is the connection? And then we noticed there was a news story recently which said that the BRA had to give you a tax certificate now in order for you to send out foreign exchange. You know, the BRA is now the replacement for the cat o' nine tails. When this government wants you to act in a particular way or to do a particular thing, the BRA is now the Barbadian boogeyman who will haunt you until you do what they want. Well, I have to ask the government, what next, sir? Is it far-fetched, Mr. Speaker, that the that the government will now say you need a tax certificate to go in the port? Well, why? If you need a tax certificate to dump garbage, is it so far-fetched to think they immediately want to go in the port? Or maybe you need a tax certificate to travel. They did that in Trinidad. Or maybe, sir, we're going to be asked very shortly to produce a tax clearance certificate in order to renew your driver's license. Or to get a liquor license. Or to open a canteen at a secondary school. Or to incorporate a company. Or to go to the hospital. And if they do this for tax, sir, what is to stop them from saying, you know what, you also need to get an NIS clearance certificate in order to be able to do any of these things? You know, sir, this kind of regime is reminiscent of an unenlightened society which operates on the basis that people must be compelled to act. You know, there's I think it's Kazakhstan, that requires every single adult in its population to pick cotton for 2 months of the year free of cost. And if you don't go and pick it, you get locked up. Kazakhstan. You know, sir, but the relevance of that is that when a society operates on the basis of compulsion, what happens then, sir, is that the opportunity for secondary markets and those things begin to flourish, sir. And I cannot imagine that's where we want to take Barbados today. But let's talk about the budget, sir. That is wrong. That is misconceived and needs to be done away with. It shouldn't even be allowed to get off the ground. Well, the budget, Mr. Speaker, this wonderful budget has just carried up the land tax on Barbadians. Now, you know, I don't know how else to put it. Why would you carry up the land tax? The minister says, well, they carried it up because we agreed to abolish the solid waste tax, but we can't really afford to abolish it, so we tack it on now to the land tax. No, sir. I don't know that is the kind. I mean, that is absurd. If you thought about a tax and you put it on, be mind enough to keep it. But when you decide to remove it, for heaven's sake, don't come and give you a little, you know, thing, say, well, move it from here, but to put it down. I tell you, because you would have figured it out anyway, because you know it ain't fools. That's where we are, Mr. Speaker. That's where we are. But how can you send up the land tax in an environment, Mr. Speaker, when property values have not been increasing? In fact, they've been declining. How can you send up the land tax, Mr. Speaker, when you remove the very allowances that encourage Barbadians to own homes on Manda? How can you send up the land tax, Mr. Speaker, when Barbadians are now not encouraged to do renovations and refurbishments to increase their value and to maintain their value? I said it is illogical. And that's a clear example of the illogic, Mr. Speaker. So the land tax has gone up. It burns me that the minister can come in here and cavalierly say to the people of Barbados that the your personal income tax has gone down. Yes, the rates in the two tax bands have gone down, but we have now realized, or we immediately realized, that the effect of the removal of the allowances has been to make sure that you actually pay more taxes than you were paying when the rates were higher. So in a report by KPMG, they have said, for an individual earning X $1,000 a year, the amount of tax you will pay, even though the bands have come down, is almost double. So the land taxes have gone up.
Honourable Member, you have 5 minutes in which to conclude.
And in this great budget, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance has also said, I am increasing user fees. And his rationale, Mr. Speaker, is we have done a comparison to see what user fees people will pay in the private sector. Now, I do not know who writes the minister's budget speech, because I think he got more sense than to write that. When a government says, I am going to increase user fees, having done a comparison with fees in the private sector, I want to ask the minister, who in the private sector is out fires? Who in the private sector issues passports? Tell me where you can go to find a company's registry or a high court registry in the private sector. But who on earth would the minister have used as his benchmark to determine that in the private sector higher fees are charged? Well, only in relation, Mr. Speaker, to daycare. But you know, I cannot understand that a government that is prepared to spend $20-something million on low-cost housing here and another $30 million there and all that kind of stuff could bulk are permitting poor Barbadians affordable access to daycare. Where's the logic in that? What is this? What is the thread that we see coming through this government? Mr. Speaker, I hope in a minute to get to Cahill, but here's the thing, sir. This Minister of Finance and his wonderful budget has come and he is like Santa Claus. Every year it's almost the same thing. Things get wrapped up nicely and you get a shirt and a tie that you don't want and you're too ashamed to tell them that. Don't get that somebody else. Because the minister has set out a long list of projects that we're going to see this year. You know, the only good thing is that he finally was too ashamed to put back in Pickering and Four Seasons. He left those out for the first time. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that he's a little embarrassed about the Sugar Factory at Andrews and the same Cahill because he hasn't mentioned either of those either. So we've been treated to comic relief once more because for the umpteenth time we could hear that this project starting this year, the next project starting this year, this project starting in September, project. But get with it, Mr. Speaker. We've heard this time and time again over the last 8 years. You fooled us once, twice, 3 times, and in year number 6 or 7 or 8, you come back with the same game. Mr. Speaker, in my few minutes left, Cahill is not to be swept under the mat. This government has entered into a contractual arrangement with a company called Cahill Energy. We spoke about it last year, but I want every Barbadian who has a computer to go and Google Cahill Energy and you will see a single web page, sir. Any company, even one that's selling snow cones, will have 10 pages if they could. But you know what Cahill Energy page says? It does not recite a single instance of a gasification project or of any other waste energy project that is ever done anywhere in the world, sir. A company that is bidding for a $700 million project will be boasting, well, don't worry me, boys, I did one here, I did one there, I did one next. Everything on Cahill's web page is we will. We have hired engineers, we've done this, but nowhere could Cahill say that they've ever done it before. Where was the feasibility? Where's the financial backing for this? But the minister says money is coming. Well, we know that the teachers' union in England was invited to fund it and fled, wouldn't touch the project because they realized that Cahill was an empty shell, nothing to it, and could not deliver the project. Could not deliver the project, sir. But Barbadians are expected to sign on to a pipe dream of a $700 million gasification plant with contracts, sir, signed by ministers of government. But you know what, sir? The Attorney General ceded any responsibility he had for those documents. We, as an administration for 14 years, know that any major project done by central government, the documents go to the Solicitor General's office for vetting and for approval. But in this contract, $700 million, arguably the largest project that we've ever done in our history, and the Attorney General cedes the responsibility for this project and paid almost $2 million to a well-known DLP lawyer. But the Attorney General's office, nowhere, Mr. Speaker, did the Solicitor General say, we've looked at this. The responsibility is outside because the Attorney General no longer appears to be the chief legal officer for government, you see. Either that or he knew better than to touch this project. I believe it is the latter. But somebody has to speak up, because we are being saddled with a project that the owners no want to sell, because the truth is they got what they wanted. They got a binding contract with the government of Barbados that they can now flog on the international market. And you know what, sir? It has not even cost them a penny. Probably a few plane fares to Barbados. And they can now flog it for millions and millions of dollars, a millstone around the neck of this country. This is the great budget that we've been offered, sir. But we will have the last word, I think, on Sunday night. I want to invite the public to attend the public meeting in Terrell-Cott Car Park at 7 o'clock Sunday night, because we know that from here on out is a cuss fest. We can get cuss past the mother burial grounds. We know it. So on Sunday night, come out and hear us, and if the Dems, they will come too, I'm sure. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.